Good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining while I try and give you some perspective on where we stand financially. The Zoom format isn't the easiest, I know, for questions, but if you put them in the chat or if you come to me after the meeting by email or by phone, I'd be glad to answer anything. I guess the lead-in message is a real positive one, that we've come through the pandemic in a very strong financial position. We've had challenges and we'll continue to have challenges, but the parish is financially solid. Looking first at our balance sheet, we ended 2021 with almost $16 million of total assets. Our long-term endowment and our trust assets are about $8 million, half of this amount. And funds already contributed to the Inspired by Love campaign represent another 10%. Again, I don't know if you can see my cursor moving here, but there's the 10% Inspired by Love, 51% that is the existing endowment and trust funds. One thing for accounting geeks who might watch, the accounts receivable line for 2021 is virtually zero. That's not because of anything that's untoward, but it just reflects the fact we changed our accounting policy in 2021 to more accurately correspond to the way that we actually keep the books. I know within the balance sheet, one of the most important things is liquidity, cash. And again, we're in a very strong position when we consider our cash. At the end of 2021, about $3.2 million of cash. 560,000 of that was the preschool, but then $1.6 million capital campaign funds. These are monies that came from, that remained from the Empower the Parish campaign, plus new money that had already come in for Inspired by Love. About $153,000 remaining in the clergy gift, $195,000 of other restricted funds. And restricted funds, just to give everybody perspective, certain things are given to the church and they're restricted in terms of by the donor when given. So things like funds that are given for laundry love or for the flower or so forth and so on are restricted. We come down to the very bottom here. Once we take care of all, or account for all the things that are restricted, we enter 2022 with more than $700,000 of free cash available to meet our bills. And this is more than we've had in the past couple of years, principally because we had an outflush of parishioners making their pledges or paying their pledges at the end of 2021. Okay, endowment and trust funds, a little bit more detail here. I mentioned earlier $8 million in the endowment and Lancaster Trust, $6 million roughly in endowment, 1.8 in the Lancaster Trust at the end of 2021. That does not yet reflect the $800,000 that in January we put into the endowment, the first chunk of money that came in from Inspired by Love. To give you a sense of the importance of why this is so crucial for us, as you'll see later, 14% of our budget, of our operating budget, comes from the draw or the income from these funds. So 14% of the amount that runs the church is coming from these investments. That's why building the endowment remains so important to our future. As Father Peter had mentioned, the endowment is overseen, as is the Lancaster Trust, by our endowment commission chaired by Bill Landis. They work with the managers of that fund to ensure that we know how things are being run. One of the projects they're going to take this year is to look into whether or not ESG, environmental, social governance types of investments might be an appropriate place to put some of our money. As I mentioned, the monies are managed in two ways. The endowment is managed by the D&B Donations and Bequests group of the diocese. The Lancaster Trust is managed by Deutsche Bank. They both have had very good results for 2021. This is really reflecting the fact that the equity market's been so vibrant. As you see over here, about 2/3 of our assets are in equity investments. D&B reported 11.4% total return for the over 2021. We haven't gotten the Lancaster Trust final for 2021 yet, but through the 9 months of 2021, they were ahead of D&B. So we continue to do very well there. Okay, let's turn to our P&L and our income statement. As you can see from the chart on the right, been roughly constant in expenses through the pandemic. And the real challenge that the staff has dealt with so successfully is being able to keep those expenses in line while things were changing and while the needs of the congregation were changing. In 2022, you'll see we've got an increase anticipated in expenses. And that's really two things going on. One, it's inflationary pressures that are affecting pretty much everything we see, be it fuel oil or anything else. And secondly, the vestry decided or approved our recommendation to increase the compensation for our clergy and for our staff to keep in line with inflation. One of the things I want to say in that context is to talk a little bit about outreach. You'll see here we've got a very small line that is the accounting line for our outreach. And this is what we do for Laundry Love and Gospel Garden and the like. This has been a source of pride for us. I think the other thing you should keep in mind is that the bulk of the money we spend for compensation is effectively for outreach, because it is what the clergy and staff do within the community and outside of the parish that is probably the most visible part of our outreach mission. I'll also note too, in the outreach line itself, even though we have not had Mayfair revenues for the last 2 years, we continue to spend a good deal of actual money through Gospel Garden, through Laundry Love, and through the fact that the Outreach Commission very carefully husbanded the resources they had from Mayfair 2 years ago to make sure that we continue to support the organizations we wanted to do. For operating income, this is the other side of the ledger. This is where the money comes from to meet the expenses we have every year. As I noted earlier, the draw that we get from endowment and the Lancaster Trust is 14%, or roughly $315,000 in 2021 of the money we spent. So again, that's why the endowment is important. It is second in importance only to the amount of money we get through the annual appeal, through the pledges. 2/3 of our money comes in through that source. If you look here, you'll see in 2020 and 2021, those dark bars at the very top of the chart, that's what it's called federal relief on the chart. This is the federal PPP funding, the Paycheck Protection Program. We were able to apply for and receive grants of a total of $453,000 across the 2 years for the church, and another $140,000 in grants for the preschool. The result of that has been that we were able to support compensation for teachers, staff, clergy, and neither the preschool nor the church had to lay anybody off during the bad times of the pandemic. Okay, this slide is really just trying to put the two of the last slides together, putting income and expenses together on the same place. Now note that although we don't have we're still closing the books for 2021. The numbers might move a little bit, but they're pretty much pretty substantially the way you're going to see them right here. We strive every year for a balanced budget. It's been difficult during the pandemic. As I mentioned, the PPP was very helpful for us, but we've not had Mayfair. In 2019, Mayfair gave us $93,000 into the income statement. We normally think of about $100,000 coming in. Our budget for 2022 is for $75,000 for Mayfair. We also haven't had plate collection in the same way that we do during normal times. Normal times, we would expect about $30,000 coming into the plate every year. This year and last year, about $10,000, the right sort of number, and that's where we're budgeting for 2022. And although some of our expenses fell during the pandemic, we weren't printing as much, for example, we still had to heat the building, we still had to pay people, so expenses didn't fall as dramatically as there was pressure on revenues. That's why I think that we really need to shout out to the staff for their ability to keep expenses in line and keep us in a good position. There's one line in here, the clergy gift, that I want to highlight. Over the last several years, we received gifts from some very generous parishioners to help support and fund our clergy. What we've tried to do is to minimize the use of this in any given year to preserve that benefit for future years. But it's there, we know if we need it. When we looked at 2021 and when the clergy or when the vestry reviewed the budget you see right here, we thought we were going to have a relatively substantial use of that gift in 2021. As final numbers have come in through December, it looks as if we're getting more money came in through pledge than we'd anticipated. The result of that is we're going to use less of the clergy gift for 2021. We'll have more available for 2022. And I think that if we were to redo the budget today, we will be able to show you a fully balanced budget for 2022. So again, thank you very much for the generosity of parishioners who made pledges and funded pledges at the end of 2021. And the final line here, I want to give a final comment I want to give you here is just a perspective on the pandemic, 2020 through 2022 combined. And if you look at all those 3 years, over the whole period, we effectively ran at a balanced budget. We effectively broke even around 32,000, including the 2022 budget deficit. So I think that we can look back and say we came out of this with a pretty good position. Now, the operating budget is only part of what we look at. We also have a capital spending budget. And the capital spending budget is really just what we need to keep the security, keep the campus and keep the grounds maintained. The property committee works with the staff to develop the capital budget that we give to the vestry. Over the past 2 years, we worked very hard to preserve cash because we weren't sure what the effect of the pandemic would be. Last year at this meeting, we showed you a capital budget of about $690,000. We actually spent about $170,000. The major reason for that was the Gray Gables phase 1. The contract wasn't awarded and work didn't really begin to the second half of the year. So this was a lower amount here. As you see in 2022, that will be our major expense in 2022. But we also did defer the stained glass work in the church. We did not get a new truck. So we were opportunistic about saving money where we could. One other thing I want to point out here, we always put a contingency into the budget, the capital budget. Last year, that was something that was needed for the roof leaks. That was something we did not anticipate. We had the money available so that when we went back to the vestry to get approval for the project, we were able to point to the money that would be used. The vestry this year approved an overall budget of $1 million for capital spending. They specifically approved the Gray Gables phase 1, and we'll go back to the vestry for specific approval of any project in excess of $10,000. So all of these are reviewed by the vestry pretty consistently. The one last comment on this, as we go into future years, we've got $1 million in round numbers right now of funds available to fund capital budget. This is the remainder of the Empower the Parish money, as well as the first money that we've got that is coming on Inspired by Love. Between that, the funding of Inspired by Love, we are confident we'll be able to meet our capital needs over the next few years. We also will be able, in some projects, because of the fact that the church has been recognized as a historic site, to apply for rebates or for grants that would fund up to 50% of certain projects. So in some cases, we'll be able to get some money back on some projects. Preschool. The preschool is, as I think you all know, an integral part of the campus and the community and the mission. The preschool provides education that addresses all areas of learning: social, emotional, spiritual, physical, and intellectual. And they were very challenged during the course of the pandemic, but the leadership, the board, and the teachers pivoted consistently and were able to deliver the best learning they could to the children in a variety of ways. I think we all can remember seeing the tents on the Great Lawn when they were going to the classrooms outside. But again, happy to report that 2021-2022 school year went back pretty much to normal. They're now planning for a summer camp. They've had full extracurricular through the year. 2022-23 is fully enrolled. I've got a wait list, so we'll be able to keep the school filled, and they will be able to have a balanced budget, including with some tuition increases. They will be able to pay their teachers again competitively. So the preschool again continues to be a source of pride for St. Mark's. This slide is really just a reminder for everybody that financial management in this parish is absolutely a team effort. We rely so much on the staff, on so many lay volunteers, and third-party vendors to help us do this, to try and effectively steward our resources. One of the measures of the financial strength of this parish is the talent and the willingness to commit time of so many individuals through so many different boards and committees and staffs. And we've joked often that the property committee, for example, is something you check into and you don't check out. You're there pretty much forever. But I've been particularly lucky in the past year to be able to work with the finance committee and with the investment committee, and both in committee sessions, but also individually one-on-one. It's been great for me to be able to avail myself of those resources, of the people we have there to give advice. And I also want to give a particular shout out here to Jill and the staff, because through all this with smile and with enthusiasm and everything else, they've kept the whole thing going, and made it fun to do. And I also want to just mention, not just mention Tim, but Tim has been terrific in the support he has given me and how much easier he has made this job. And I know that he will be a terrific and effective treasurer for you going forward. So on the final slide here, the accomplishments looking at, I think most of the items I've either touched on already, or they're self-explanatory, or in the case of modified revenue recognition policy, are probably of interest only to accounting geeks and probably not even that interesting to them. But I think the key takeaway for you is that we have gotten through the pandemic, or the 2/3 of the pandemic we've seen so far, in a solid financial position. We're poised well in terms of where we are and how we face 2022 and beyond. So we will make the slides we'll make available to you on the website. I say not always easy to do questions here, but if there are any questions, just my email's here, just give me a mail or a call and I can go through it for you. Thanks very much.